No, they won't. The brutal reality is they won't, because everyone understands a no-fly zone, as your listeners and viewers may be sick of hearing by now, involves shooting down Russian planes, and it involves firing at Russian surface-to-air missiles on the ground to take them out so that your own planes can fly safely. That's the reality of it. And there is profound concern about the conventional escalation and indeed the nuclear escalation that might result from anything along those lines. And I think what Zelensky is doing is fully aware that this isn't going to happen, is presenting a big ask, perhaps in order to make smaller asks seem more reasonable. Indeed, asks like fighter jets from Poland.
Yeah, so why did the US so quickly say no to that offer from Poland to send their fighter jets? Of course, it was in exchange for new fighter jets from the US.
I think there's a lot of confusion about this, and the US initially said it was discussing the issue with Poland and it given a green light, but it seems Poland is unwilling to do this on its own. It wants to give the jets to the United States. It said it would make them available at Ramstein Air Base, which is a big American air base in Germany, implying that it wanted the Americans to hand them over, which of course is a way of saying, you know, we're up for this, but we don't want to expose ourselves to Russian retaliation. We'd like the Americans to do it on our behalf. And I think from the American perspective, at a time when they are focused intensely on getting huge amounts of anti-tank weapons, anti-aircraft systems, ammunition, other kinds of aid to Ukraine, the idea of being able to get full-fledged warplanes into Ukraine is a serious logistical challenge. Who would fly them, or would you ship them disassembled into Ukraine? I think those logistical problems are really severe, and so there's no obvious solution to them.
Yeah. Interestingly, too, you've reported that British intelligence have argued that Ukraine's air defences, in fact, are succeeding against Russia. Is that the case?
We've seen from both American sources and from British ones, and indeed from the evidence presented by imagery and footage available to us on social media, that Ukraine's air defences are still functioning. And you don't have to take officials' word for this. You can go look up videos. Indeed, The Economist has some pieces on this, or you could go look it up on social media, of jets being shot down over Kharkiv, Ukraine's second biggest city, shoulder-fired missiles like the Stinger missile that, of course, did such damage to Soviet forces in Afghanistan, taking down Russian helicopters in this campaign. And I think the big flaw of Russia's invasion at the beginning was not succeeding in destroying Ukraine's air defense network, and they are now paying a very heavy price for that in terms of their substantial air losses in the last week alone. Yeah.
Tonight we hear that there's been supposedly yet another agreement for evacuations from 6 heavily besieged cities. It's becoming hard to trust Russia and the tactics of attacking civilians.
Well, many of us who followed the Russian intervention in Syria, which began, of course, in 2015 in support of the Assad regime, are familiar with these tactics. They want to get civilians out, in part to be able to fire more freely and effectively on urban areas, but they also use these as opportunities to fire on civilians as they leave, as they escape. Presumably in order to terrorize the population and establish their control. I think terrorizing the civilian population is part of the objective, because it helps subdue resistance, and it helps persuade Ukrainian authorities that their choice is between surrendering and resisting at the cost of substantial civilian casualties. And I think that's the dilemma that Russia's armed forces are seeking to place onto the Ukrainian leadership.
Which is resisting really vehemently at the moment. What is your assessment of how much progress Russia is actually making in its assault on the capital?
I would say it is making progress. You know, we're all fixated on this big convoy to the northwest of Kiev that hasn't moved in a week because of logistical difficulties, problems with lack of bridges that have been blown up, and inability to get engineering equipment to the front. And all of that is true, and it does indicate substantial military deficiencies in the Russian war machine. But all I would say is that we are seeing Russian units now move within 15, 20 kilometers of the eastern side of Kiev. And I think, if we think the Russian machine is seizing up and isn't moving, we're going to find ourselves unpleasantly surprised in a few days when we find that Russian armored units and columns are really on the outskirts of Kiev and able to fire on the city in quite serious ways. So Russia is making progress. It is moving around the capital. My only caution is to say that its biggest breakthroughs are in the south from Crimea. And if it really wants to mount a sustained siege of Kiev, which is a big city, it's going to have to move forces away from some of those other theatres because it doesn't have the forces to encircle the capital and to assault it at the moment.
Shashank, so appreciate your analysis as always. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.